All right, let's talk to a Florida legend, SEC Network's best out there, Chris Doering. CD, what's up, man?
David, good to be back with you, man. It's nice to finally be talking about real games. Getting a chance to watch a little SEC football on Saturday night with Vandy kicking the season off, and my alma mater here just a little bit away from starting the week one action. So I'm excited, man.
Definitely want to talk about that game, but I wanted to start off with QBs in the SEC because it's been a while since we've had these many questions. Alabama TBD, A&M names Connor Weigman. You've got Georgia naming Carson Beck a couple weeks back. Arkansas with KJ Jefferson. Just when you look at the landscape of the SEC and their quarterbacks, Will Rogers, I can keep naming them. Just what do you see? How open is it potentially?
It's an interesting mix, I think, because like half the schools you have returning starters that you feel really good about, and then half the schools we've been going through quarterback battles all offseason, some of which still haven't been decided. I think the difference is kind of what you alluded to. The highest profile teams in the conference now are changing quarterbacks and Stetson Bennett moving on and having Carson Beck take over there in Athens. And then, this quarterback competition in Tuscaloosa continuing presumably into week one. So I don't remember having this many teams at kind of the top tier of the conference being less settled at the quarterback position than what it appears to this year. But it adds some intrigue. And then on the other side, Will Rogers, the most tenured quarterback in the league. For some reason, the media picks them to go seventh in the West this year. I completely don't understand that. But it is a kind of a cool little mix that I think leads to some great storylines.
CD, that brings me to another point, too. There's a bunch of teams in the SEC that I can believe they can win 9 games. There's a bunch of teams I could see. That's those same teams I could see being 7th as well. I mean, would it shock you if Auburn won a bunch of games, if Arkansas wins or loses? Like, there's so many questions out there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that there's so many teams kind of bunched up. I think at the top we have Georgia, and then there's a little step down, and then there's LSU and Alabama. And then after that, it seems like there's a lot of teams that are vying to beat one another up. Kind of the dynamic in the East last year. I think you saw Tennessee and South Carolina assert themselves at the cost of Kentucky and Florida backsliding a little bit last year. I think that kind of dynamic exists throughout the entire conference this year. And I had a discussion on my show with Alyssa Lang this morning. Like, I believe Texas A&M is probably the third best team in the West as things shake out this season. But I could also see them underperforming this year, and I could see Mississippi State being the third best team in the West. So a lot of parity, I think, in the league reminds me very much of the NFL. And I think that creates more excitement in all 14 SEC schools.
All right, let's keep it there with A&M. You mentioned Connor Weigman. If Wiggy is what we think here in College Station he's going to be, then is it closer to that, third team, potentially second team in the West?
I believe that they could be the kind of the dark horse in the West this year. And my opinion has changed. Your buddy, Billy Lucci, man, kind of talked me into, understanding the dynamic of all the returning talent back in the summer when he was on our show. And then as I got a chance to be around some of the players, particularly Anaya Smith in Nashville at Media Days, I felt this confidence, and I felt from him a sense of urgency, and that happens. I tore my Achilles tendon in the NFL, my first major injury that I missed the entire season from. And when you come back, you're kind of on a mission. And I feel like that entire team has taken that sense of urgency from Anais and the embarrassment of last year, and they've used it to create this mantra that they kept talking about over and over again. And that's let's finish, finish. And I think it's important for Texas A&M to get off to a fast start this year to help build that momentum. Because I think a lot of times in the offseason, teams that are ascending think they have what it takes, but until you actually see it play out on the field on a Saturday, you don't really know for sure. So having a fast start, I believe they go to Miami the second week of the season. I think that'll be a game that can go a long way in helping to define what their year is going to look like.
And let's talk about Tennessee, because I like what they have, but I have my questions about Joe Milton. A lot of people do. What do you expect from him, and what do you expect from the Vols this year with Kentucky really creeping closer?
Yeah, I go back to what I said a minute ago, and that my opinion on A&M changed since seeing them in Nashville. And I think my opinion has kind of waned a little bit on Tennessee, just as I look a little closer. We are all naive if we think Hendon Hooker, one of the best players in the history of that program, moving on and filling that void is not going to create some sort of at least speed bump in the acclimation of this offense to having Joe Milton as the full-time trigger man. I know it was great getting a chance to watch him play against Vandy and Clemson last year at the end of the year, but I think Florida catches a real break with Tennessee coming to town the third week of the season. It's the first real hostile environment he'll have a chance to be the starting quarterback in. So I as a Gator, I am much more thankful to have Tennessee coming to town in September than I would in November when they've had a chance to really kind of gel and acclimate to one another. But I do think Tennessee takes a little bit of a step back. I mentioned Mississippi State's my dark horse team in the West. Kentucky is that same team in the East. I honestly believe they finished second this year. I was largely disappointed with what happened last year. I thought they had the pieces to be a much better team, potentially winning 10 games. But this year, with Devin Leary coming over from NC State, Liam Cohen returning as the offensive coordinator, what should be a better offensive line and a stout defense as always, I think that they're going to be the team that maybe elevates themselves from that group of teams in the middle of the SEC East.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Florida because Cam Rising, it's all about the injury status of him. He says he feels great. If he plays for Utah, what does that mean to that matchup? Because last year, Anthony Richardson was on a different level.
Yeah, here's the thing. You could tell me he's ready to go. You can lift him number one on the depth chart. But coming back from an injury like he suffered at the end of the season last year, not having a ton of time to go full speed in practice, even if you get him, how close to 100% is he, and how much is the chemistry able to be picked up where it left off before the injury? So I do have some questions. Also, Brant Kuithe, the tight end that lit Florida up last year, 9 catches, over 100 yards and a touchdown, probably will not play either. So again, I think Florida is the beneficiary of the schedule. It's going to be tough regardless going out to Salt Lake, but I think not having Cam Rising potentially, or not having him at 100%, not having Kuithe, it could allow Florida to maybe minimize what I think would otherwise be a roster advantage that the Utes would have.
I got you on the show, so I got to ask you, Swamp Kings. I loved it. I know some people didn't love it. What I really enjoyed about it was there's a certain DNA in winning teams. There's a culture. There's a dog in them, and I really saw that in both of those championship seasons. What did you kind of take? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I've been on part of some really good teams, and I think when you have really good teams, there's a mix of personalities, and you do have that dog. You do have those guys that are kind of on the edge. And, I know in the trailer they talked about the 38 or 41 or 43 arrests that, that roster had. Some of those more serious than others. I would have liked to have seen more discussion of some of that. But I do think you have to have – you don't want choir boys on your team. You want to have some guys that have a little edge to them, and that Florida team during that era certainly had a number of those. It was great seeing a little more from Brandon Seiler. He became a quick star as that series was debuted. But I'll tell you, as a Florida guy, it was a great fluff piece, a great advertisement for the program. I think it's a reminder of a lot of younger players. Florida's been largely irrelevant for a decade plus, and so some of the younger kids out there don't realize what Florida's capable of. Some of the Florida players themselves don't know what Florida's capable of when you get things rolling, that atmosphere of the swamp, the support from the fans. So I think it served the program really well, and I think that it'll go a long way in terms of helping to get Florida back on track.
CD, I lied. I do want to ask this. I'm really high on Kentucky. I love Ray Davis. I love what he can do. Devin Leary could be the truth. Liam Cohen coming back. They got a great wide receiver group. Are they the team in the East that can make some noise and maybe be that second-best team?
Yeah, I do think they're the second-best team in the East for all the reasons that you mentioned. Liam Cohen, I never thought he would return to college football, let alone to Lexington, and to get him back after only a year was quite the coup for Mark Stoops. The thing I love about Coach Stoops, the second longest tenured coach in the SEC, is that he really knows his team. He knows who they want to be, even so much so they recruit a little differently, right? Instead of going down south into all the SEC footprint, he goes north into Ohio, made hay up in Big Ten area. Wants to build that team around the blue-collar mentality of being able to run the football first. Goes out and gets Liam Cohen a couple years ago because he knows that offense is based around downhill rushing attack and play-action pass, wanting to add a little more of the vertical threat. And they certainly can do that. You mentioned that trio of wide receivers, Barry Brown, Dane Key, Tavion Robinson. I think that may be the best collection of wide receivers that I can remember Kentucky having in a long time. So couple that with what we expect to be a better offensive line. Ray Davis, 1,000 yards rusher in this SEC last season coming over from Vandy. I think they got all the pieces. Hopefully they can put it together.
All right, that is Chris Doering of the SEC Network. Chris, thanks so much, man. Take care.
Hey, good to be with you again, David. Have a great season, man.